All right, let's dive right into a really dense, really ambitious new novel that asks one huge question. How much can you truly know about the past, especially when the future is, well, literally underwater?
So, I want you to picture a future Britain that's basically become this soggy, scattered archipelago. All the great cities we know, London, Manchester, you name it, they're just gone, swallowed by the sea in what they call the inundation. What's left of humanity is just scrambling to rebuild on whatever high ground is left.
And right at the heart of this kind of grim new world is a literary mystery. There's this famous poem that was read out loud just one time at a dinner party way back in 2014, and then it just vanished. Poof, gone without a trace. And one particular scholar is convinced that finding it is the key to understanding the generation that let the world drown. Yeah, that's us.
So our guy, our protagonist, is this scholar named Thomas Metcalfe. He's a literature professor who is completely obsessed with our time, the early 21st century. See, to people in his era, our world was this amazing golden age, right before it all fell apart.
So, you're probably asking, how did things get so bad? Well, the novel breaks it down. First, there was the derangement. That's basically our time, when we ignored all the scientists who were screaming at us. That, of course, led to the inundation, when the oceans rose. And if that wasn't bad enough, that was followed by the skirmishes. Yep, limited nuclear wars that kicked off tsunamis and, get this, halved the world's population, leading them to where they are now.
Okay, so how does a historian in the future actually do his research? Well, in 2119, they can see everything. I'm talking every email you ever sent, every text you deleted, even your weirdest late-night Google searches. Privacy? Yeah, that's a thing of the past. It's totally gone. And this godlike access to our data is what's feeding Thomas's whole obsession.
And all of that brings us to the absolute core of his quest. He zeroed in on one single night. Just one. A dinner party back in October 2014. It was the night a famous poet read a brand new poem for his wife, a poem that was never seen or heard from again.
The poet at the center of this whole thing? A guy named Blundy. He's this huge literary giant, but also, by pretty much every account, just a terrible human being. Arrogant, cheated on his wife constantly, and was a climate denier who thought the whole thing was just a big fuss. His wife, Vivien, was his famous muse, and this lost poem, A Corona for Vivien, was supposed to be his ultimate masterpiece for her. So Thomas puts on his digital detective hat and starts piecing together what happened that night. He digs up an email from one of the guests, and it describes Vivien's reaction to hearing the poem. The first clue? It says she looked stunned. Okay, simple enough, right?
But then he finds a text message sent during the party from someone else. This one offers a slightly different story. This guest says Vivien was tearful. Stunned, tearful, they're not quite the same, are they? The plot thickens.
And then comes the final piece of the puzzle. Another email sent after the party, and this one delivers the knockout punch. This guest says Vivien didn't just look stunned or tearful, she looked absolutely gutted. Now that's a whole different story, and you can see why this contradiction is driving Thomas mad. What on earth really happened that night?
But here's the thing. Right when Thomas thinks he's about to crack the case, the entire book just flips on its head. Everything we've just learned, his entire investigation, turns out it's all built on a lie.
The book just, bam, it switches perspectives. Suddenly, we're reading a secret journal written years later by Vivien, the poet's wife. And let me tell you, her voice is not what you expect. It's sharp, it's angry, and she is nothing like the gentle, supportive muse that Thomas and the world thought she was.
And this is where we see the huge gap between the myth and the reality. The public myth was this perfect literary couple. But the reality? A complete performance. She reveals their marriage was just empty, filled with his constant cheating, his massive ego, and her deep, boiling resentment for the career she had to give up for him.
So that poem, that big romantic gesture, to Vivien, it wasn't a gift, not even close. It was the ultimate betrayal. He had taken her life, all her pain and her sacrifices, and twisted them into a monument to his own genius. She didn't see it as a tribute. She saw it as pure theft. And out of all this rage come the two biggest, darkest secrets of the whole book. Because her journal doesn't just tell us what happened to the poem. Oh no, it tells us what happened to the poet himself.
So here's what she did. After everyone went home and Frances passed out drunk, she sat down and read the poem properly.
Seeing it for the self-serving lie that it was, she calmly took the one and only manuscript and fed it into the fireplace, page by painstaking page. The next morning, she just told her husband it must have been stolen. His masterpiece wasn't lost, she erased it.
But her revenge didn't stop there. Years later, when Francis developed early Alzheimer's, Vivien became his caregiver. She took control of his medication and, as she admits in her journal, she deliberately mismanaged it, worsening his confusion, accelerating his decline. She tries to call it a mercy, but it's pretty clear this was payback, fueled by a lifetime of resentment.
So, wow, that is the plot. It's this wild mashup, right? You've got a bleak future, a literary detective story, and then this super dark domestic thriller. It's a huge swing for the fences. But the real question is, does the book actually pull it off?
Well, if you look at the numbers, it seems like this is a book that people respect more than they actually love. The Goodreads rating is fine, kind of middling. Sales look pretty low. And even though some critics threw around phrases like tour de force, you'll notice it's not showing up on any of the big award lists.
Actually, my favorite review had this fantastic Australian phrase for it. They called the book messier than a Barbie in a thunderstorm. And that just nails it, doesn't it? The ideas are huge, the twists are shocking, for sure, but the way it's all put together feels, well, chaotic, maybe a bit much.
And when you put it up against some of the modern classics of the genre, you can really see where it struggles. It just doesn't have that raw, gut punch feeling of The Road. The twists don't feel as elegant or heartbreaking as something like Never Let Me Go. And unlike, say, Station 11, it's really missing that little spark of hope.
So what's the bottom line here? Look, what we can know is a super ambitious book. It's trying to do a lot. But that slow, kind of academic feel in the first half and that really jarring switch in the middle, it might leave you feeling like it was a fascinating idea for a book, but maybe not a story that really grabs you by the heart.
And in the end, it leaves you chewing on this massive question. The same one Vivien's story forces on us, and one that feels really relevant right now. Everyone agrees, Frances Blundy's poem was probably a masterpiece, a work of pure genius. But it was a genius born from cruelty and lies. And that really makes you stop and think, can a piece of art be so great, so beautiful, that it excuses the terrible person who made it?